Hi, this is Eric Skeens with 3 Tree Tech. We simplify the complexities of technologies for businesses and enterprises. And I'd like to introduce you to Chris Moeller. He leads up our IoT and mobility practice here at 3 Tree Tech and has been doing wireless and IoT for the last 13 plus years and has been building upon that. And we brought him on because of the fact that we realized that the mobility and the IoT space was a very evolving and fast changing space to the point where we needed somebody that knew this space well, has done a lot of different things within the IoT space specifically, where a lot of times you've got science projects and you have different things that are occurring within there. And Chris has done everything from connecting refrigeration devices to just different endpoints, all the way up to the most interesting or odd one was bovine for me, and connecting cows and making sure that they're monitored appropriately, where they're supposed to be, blah 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 blah. And wanted to introduce him and ask him a few questions because we get a lot of questions around 5G, IoT, mobility. What is it? Where is it going? And doesn't it just make my cell phone faster? Doesn't it make it allow me to watch movies and download movies a lot faster? Isn't that just all it really does? And we wanted to dispel a little bit of that and ask Chris a few questions about what he's seen in that market and kind of where that's going. So Chris, before we get started into the actual the meat of 5G and IoT, wanted to get an understanding, and for our audience, how did you get into the wireless mobility industry in the first place?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of really fell into it. When I was finishing up college, I started working big box retail, selling things like audio, video, some other electronics. And as time was going through there, it was actually a really exciting time. High definition was just coming out, so it was kind of a transition within the television and audio space. Surround sounds were becoming big. And it was great working for a great company that unfortunately went out of business. So go jump into another company and just not the same experience. Someone who I had worked with before and actually recruited me at different jobs introduced me to someone in the wireless industry. And it was like, okay, it's still, let's just go see what it is. It was selling something else. At that time, we were in second generation, 2G as most people hear it. And you're talking about voice. I mean, yeah, you have a little bit of data, internet, but that wasn't what it is today. I think there was 4 smartphones on the wall, and we probably sold 4 in the first 6 months I worked there total. I mean, it wasn't much, but once we started getting into that, and you get 6 months, it was about 6 months where all of a sudden you started hearing about 3G. And I really started seeing what 3G could bring. We saw little video, small video clips, but video on small screens. It wasn't great quality, but it was really that insight. As things went on, then the iPhone comes out, and that just kind of revolutionized everything to really take off and see what you can do. Start talking around that same time while it was still years away. You be in the industry, you start hearing about 4G, you start hearing about connected devices, start hearing about all these things that you can do. And so that's what really kind of hooked me. Yep. Is when I saw the capability of this and where things were going. So, like I said, I kind of fell into it, but I fell into something that I just learned to love, and it fits me very well for the type of person that I am.
Okay, great. That's great insight. I mean, when I look at mobility and IoT, or just mobility in general, most people I would imagine are similar to the way I look at it. Is it's a cell phone, you got a cell phone plan, and you use it for voice or use it for apps and use it for data. I remember the days when all it was voice, and at certain points carrying a bag phone, carrying a pager on top of that. Yep. So when I look at it, there's a lot that is left within that space that a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand it, and again, I joke about, and you've been in meetings with me before, I joke, one of the reasons we brought Chris on is because I couldn't spell IoT. And so You mentioned that the just kind of the evolution of 2G, 3G, 4G, and now we're on the forefront of 5G. Outside of that, why did you continue to stay in that space, IoT and mobility? Like, why IoT and mobility?
Yeah, I think for me, it originally it fell more on the IoT side of things when I started seeing what you connect. And you kind of alluded to earlier because I say it so often. IoT is a science project. It's the greatest and worst thing about IoT is that it's almost always a science project, especially in the very beginning. You know, I'm a son of a physicist. You know, it's something that just I think is inherent to me, that I like that challenge of that science project and figuring out how to do stuff. Don't always want to keep doing it after I figure it out,
yeah.
But it was great. There was always new things that we could do. Now we're starting to get into 5G, and you know that does so much for IoT, but it's also something that is going to be, in my opinion, and what a lot of people say is it has the capability, depending on how it's done, to be revolutionary for just the world. You know, when it comes to technology and what it can bring. So that's where it's, you know, the mobility side is getting even more and more exciting again. You know, the first time it got a little exciting because, oh yeah, internet, you know, on your phone when you're out, you apps and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, the introduction of IoT, of 5G, adding into IoT, but then also everything else can do is just an exciting time right now.
Okay. No, that's great. And we do enjoy a lot of those science projects that have started to get packages and programs. These technologies that were intended for IoT have now started to collaborate together to actually make, I know one that you've come across that has been a somewhat revolutionary within the hospitality industry, within the food prep and food industry, which is IoT in a box. And so this science project portion, I think, is starting to go away from being something that people are just playing around with, to where it's actually making an impact into the business.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot more productized, you know, realization of productized offerings. You know, I look at one of the ones that's the most mature industry is actually the transportation industry. They were one of the early ones, the first ones that kind of had a connected device to be able to track where they were at and stuff like that. And I've looked at the transition that you're going through within that industry. You go from there to just a couple of years ago, a mandate coming through where now they're required to do, people that drive all throughout the day, you know, and have always had requirements on how much they're allowed to drive, how much rest time they have to have. But the problem is that people they cheated those. They didn't want to do it because they want to drive longer, they wanted to make more money on it, but it was inherently dangerous. So the government came out and said, hey, we've got this capability with technology and IoT to be able to make sure that they're doing things properly. So you take that and then you move on. Now we're putting cameras in there for more safety, putting AI in those cameras to be able to recognize, you know, if you're driving a truck full of fuel, you probably shouldn't be smoking. You know, so be able to recognize that they've got a cigarette in their things, or they're dozing off. So that's one of that is very mature, that you've seen them go through several different stages. You also bring up the refrigeration. You know, when you look at both of those, there's you know, when you talk about what IoT is, we're like, oh, it's a connected device, this and that. And really when I go down to it, what does it provide? You know, it provides, yes, they're a connected device, it's utilizing technology to either be able to control something, gather information, but ultimately all these things are to make things either more efficient, you know, more productive, safer. And I think that's the key with it, is you're able to put these machines into places sometimes that you don't want to put people in all the time. Yeah. You know, you don't want to do some of these tedious tasks that take, you know, 2 hours to walk around a stadium to check all of your temperature monitors in your freezer, where as soon as that person's done, they have to re-walk it to go do it. Instead, being able to get those temperature readings just automatically to make sure your food is safe, to make sure your employees that are eating it and your customers are eating are safe. So really, whenever you look throughout IoT, I mean, those are really some of the big things that we're trying to do, is how to make things easier, how to make things more efficient, how to make things safer. One of the most important things about businesses is the information they have. So being able to have these connected devices out there, you get an influx of information like you've never had that you can later use to analyze, to, just have better outcomes. So no matter what it is, being able to really understand what's going on with whatever you're looking to get information from. Take the stadiums and the temperature. How often, if you have one person walking around every 2 hours and they can only get one every 2 hours of a temperature reading, compared to getting one from every single refrigerator every 10, 15 minutes. Now you can start seeing things, okay, is a refrigerator or a freezer being left open too long? Yep. Which now all of a sudden not only puts the food in danger, but also puts the piece of equipment in danger because it's having to work that much harder. So that's just a small example. When you think about anything across business, it's really the information they have that's going to be the most valuable piece that they can really get from a lot of these IoT deployments.
Okay, well that's very important, and I would imagine that plays a lot into the advent of and I'm using, it seems to be more of a consumer type of a thing, but using a self-driving cars, self-driving trucks that you spoke about the trucking industry. Those self-driving trucks may be a huge game changer within that space, but it sounds like the information is the most important part, and being able to gather that information at lightning speeds and
yeah. Well, it's also that information that's going to lead us to those other capabilities. So right now, whether it's a Tesla or any of the other ones, they're putting massive amounts of sensors inside the cars today that are doing regular driving. So that way they can get all of the behaviors of proper driving, of what's going to happen when the road is slick, when this is that. So they can take all that information and put them into algorithms, put it into the information to actually be able to make a self-driving car or truck, so it's gonna take and be that original information gather, which in some cases a business is going to use immediately.
Yep.
To make them more productive, to just make things run more smoothly, or again, I go back to safety, make things safer. But it's also the continual accumulation of all this data. So that's going to be probably one of the biggest drivers of how revolutionary IoT can be in the long run, is all this data you're going to get just by starting to implement it.
It sounds like IoT enables organizations to do more automation and remove some of those burdens of just tedious, mundane tasks, and allow those to be just handled, and potentially removing error and pains that come into having a manual process across that. Mm-hmm. So the last thing that I just wanted to ask you, because again, it goes back down to that science project piece, and I know that there's a lot of interesting projects you've done over your career and you continue to do here at 3Tree Tech. What is by far the most interesting project you've worked on to date?
The most interesting one, and what's funny is that it essentially was a failure. It was a science project that didn't do, and it was ahead of its time. So I got a chance to work with a company who they did some of the intelligence within traffic lights.
Okay.
So there's been intelligence in those, being able to use sensors already. So it's almost an IoT thing to be able to know how long to be on, when to shut off, when things are coming. But they saw kind of the future of being able to, recognize emergency vehicles, recognizing traffic patterns even better. The one that we focused a little bit more on was the actual emergency vehicles. So being able to actually have communication, we were trying to have communication between the emergency vehicle and the local traffic lights. That way, as soon as their lights came on, their sirens, they would actually be able to trigger to be able to set up a clean pathway, essentially to a hospital or to a clinic.
To wherever.
So it was a lot of things, and it was capable, but it wasn't the reliability that was needed at that time, because the networks just weren't prepared.
Yep.
We're really just getting there with the 5G capabilities and some of the edge networking that's going to come with that. So it'd be interesting to see. Unfortunately, the people that were part of that group have gone different ways, and that company went out of business. But others are going to pick up right where they left off. They already have. But that was probably the most interesting because there's a lot of challenges, and like a lot of science projects, they don't all work.
Yeah.
And you learn from those mistakes, and we learned some of our limits at that time. And I think with a lot of the people that did those type of projects and learned the limits, are a lot of the people that made it the industry push to get where we are today.
Yeah.
To shorten those limits to be able to do a lot more. So that was definitely probably the most interesting one that I did. The cow one is always fun to talk about, but
sure.
that one definitely was probably the funnest one that I worked on.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate your time and to kind of go through a lot of the challenges, the pains, some of the things that I didn't honestly understand all that well in the mobility and IoT space. Appreciate your time today in listening to Chris Moeller talk about IoT and mobility and how that technology set and solutions helps automate business processes for enterprises and organizations in order to remove manual processes, complex manual processes, and essentially simplify the complex. Thank you.